So Alex Hormozi just sat down with Tony Robbins for a podcast, and most people watched this and thought, wow, that was really motivating. But here's the thing, motivation had nothing to do with what actually happened in that conversation, because what you just witnessed, whether you realized it or not, was a live masterclass in psychological influence, including identity restructuring, emotional anchoring, and frame control happening all in real time. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how Tony did it using a 9-step influence framework that most business professionals or most business owners, most salespeople will never even notice. Now, there are 9 specific influence patterns that Tony deploys in this single conversation, and by the end of this video, you'll be able to name every single one of them, and more importantly, you'll know how to actually use them yourself. But the one that changed everything for Alex, that one actually comes later, so it's not really the one that you'd expect. So, just quick context, so you know why I'm qualified to break this down. I closed $100 million in deals in my first 4 years in sales and business, and I was able to do that once I realized that everybody had it backwards. Everybody says life is all about sales and marketing, but they're wrong. World leaders don't market anything, they influence the market. Most iconic figures in human history never really sold anyone on a single thing. They just used influence principles to plant ideas in people's heads and make them think it was their idea in the first place. But here's the problem with learning influence. After investing over $1 million in learning from the best, everything out there I found is either A, too philosophical to be tactical, or B, too clinical to be useful for somebody who just wants to make more money yesterday. So I made it my mission to demystify and simplify the world's most powerful influence principles that were previously locked away behind the doors of history's most influential icons. And I'm going to walk you through what I call the 9 layers of invisible influence, exact patterns that Tony Robbins uses in this one conversation to completely restructure how Alex Hormozi sees himself. Here they are. Number 1 is frame control, identity splitting, emotional association, you got state anchoring, you got embedded commands, future pacing, metaphor bypass, authority stacking, and emotional amplification. Right now, if you just watch this conversation casually, you will catch maybe 1 or 2 of these. But if you're paying close attention, maybe you'll get 4. But if you understand the full framework that I'm about to give you, you will see all 9. And once you do, you won't be able to unsee them. Now we're going to go through each one in the order that Tony deploys them. But I want you to pay special attention to numbers 2, 6, and 9, because those 3, when you combine them, are essentially a blueprint for changing how someone sees himself in under 30 minutes. So let's get into it.
How do you see the dichotomy between duty and enjoyment as it relates to the impact that you want to make with the business that you have? Yeah.
So I don't look at duty and enjoyment. I look at it as more like it's all enjoyment, because contribution is the ultimate enjoyment for me. I mean, I get into business for impact, and economics are second. If I have enough impact, you'll never have to worry about economics in your life. And I found that to be true in my own life. So I don't look at it quite that way.
Right out of the gate, within the first 90 seconds, Tony does something that most people completely miss. He uses the word duty. And then instead of responding to the content of what Alex said, Tony changes the word itself. He said words are tricky. They produce emotion, right? Duty sounds like an obligation. Now here's what's happening underneath the surface. Tony didn't answer the question. He changed the emotional charge of the word. He took duty, which carries obligation and pressure and heaviness, and he reframed it to opportunity, which carries more of like a contribution, pull energy, right? So let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a conversation, a sales call or a negotiation or a meeting where somebody said something, and instead of debating the point, you just shifted how they felt about the words that they used? Because when you start to control the meaning of the words in any conversation, then you control the emotional frame. And whoever controls the emotional frame controls the direction of the entire conversation, right? Now remember this, whoever controls the meaning controls emotion, and whoever controls emotion controls behavior, right? So that's layer number 1, controlling the frame and therefore the emotions and the behavior. But Tony does not stop there, because controlling the frame of a conversation is one thing. What he does next is far more advanced. He goes after something much deeper than language. He goes after identity.
The strongest force in the human personality for any human being, you, me, doesn't matter. The strongest force is that we need to stay consistent with the way we identify ourselves, right? Identity is the controlling force of human being. If you are of an identity that says, I always find the way to victory, you will find the victory.
Now, this might be the most important moment in the entire conversation. Tony said the strongest force in the human personality is the need to stay consistent with how we identify ourselves. But then watch this, he introduces 2 characters. He splits Alex into analytical Alex and anabolic Alex, right? Now, here's why this is genius level influence. Most people, when they want someone to change, they attack the behavior. They say, stop doing this and start doing that. You need to think differently. But that creates resistance, right? Because you're asking somebody to fight against who they already believe they are. Whereas Tony doesn't do that. Instead, he splits Alex's identity into two different versions. Now, for context, this is something I just went over with one of my one-on-one students on a one-on-one retreat in San Diego this past week. I do these for really just the highest levels of people who want to just get massive change, kind of like Alex had with Tony, but not just 30 minutes worth of it, but 3 or 4 days worth of it. So you can imagine how much actually changes over that. But back to this, Tony didn't say just like change who you are. He says, you already have two versions inside of you. Which one do you want to lead the charge? And I want you to think about that for a second in your own life. Have you ever felt like there are two versions of you, right? The version that knows what to do, but then the version who actually does it, right? The one that plays it safe versus the one that goes all in. That's the power of identity splitting or identity dissociation. When you learn to create that distinction for someone, not attacking who they are, but giving them a more powerful version of themselves to step into, and their behavior changes automatically, because behavior is what follows identity. So instead of correcting behavior, don't correct the behavior, restructure identity, because again, behavior follows automatic. So now, Tony obviously has control of the frame. He's created a split in Alex's identity, but here's a problem. Alex is still in his head, right? He's thinking about what Tony is saying, and he hasn't felt it yet. And Tony knows the thinking is not the same as feel. So this is now where Tony goes from coach to surgeon. He looks at Alex and he says, you're not emotionally associated, right? Now, here's what most really smart analytical business owners and professionals like Alex don't realize, and this might hit close to home. Thinking about a goal is not the same as feeling a goal. You can intellectually understand where you want to go and still never move towards it because you are living in abstraction. You are dissociated from the emotion that makes goals actually goals. Right? It's like looking at a menu at a restaurant versus tasting the food. The menu tells you what's available, but the taste is what actually makes you come back, right? Most high performers who are really smart are stuck reading the menu of their own life. Whereas Tony is saying, stop reading and start tasting. So let me ask you this, and just be honest for a sec. How many of your goals right now just live in your head, but haven't actually dropped that 6 to 12 inches from your head to your chest yet, right? To your heart. You know what you want, but do you actually feel it? Because there is a massive gap between knowing and feeling. And Tony just identified that gap in Alex in real time. Smart people oftentimes live in abstraction, but influential people create emotional association. That's the gap. And this is exactly why what Tony does next is so important, because once he's identified that Alex is stuck in his head, he doesn't just tell him to feel warm. He physically shifts Alex's state, and he does it with one of the most subtle, most powerful techniques in all of influence. So watch this moment carefully.
Again, I'm not pretending to have the answer for you, but I'm just giving my 2 cents.
I'm
You're asking me,
open.
right?
Yeah,
because I want to see more of that smile that I see in you right now. Okay,
I'm wide open.
This is the real you right here, by the way.
Tony shifts the entire conversation from ideas to physiology. He says, look at that smile right now. That is the real you. Now, on the surface, this seems like a pretty simple observation, but it's actually a very precise move. He's doing 2 things simultaneously. Number one, first, he's interrupting Alex's analytical pattern, pulling him out of his head and into his body. And second, he's anchoring that physical state, the smile, the energy, the openness, directly to the anabolic Alex identity that he created earlier. So think of it like this. He built the house in section 2, right? Anabolic Alex is the house. Now he's moving Alex into it. And that smile is just the opening of the front door. Now you've already probably experienced something like this yourself. You're overthinking something, you're stressed, you're in your head, and somebody says something that just snaps you out of it. Maybe they make you laugh, maybe they point out your body language, but suddenly you just completely shift and your whole energy changes. That's a pattern interrupt followed by a state anchor. And Tony just did it very intentionally and tied it to a new identity. So if you want to think about it this way, state shift plus identity reinforcement is how you rewire somebody in real time, right? Now, at this point, Tony has built the frame. He's now split the identity as well. He's created emotional association and anchored a new state. Most high-performance coaches or salespeople or business owners, they're motivating their team, whatever, would stop here, right? But Tony is not most coaches. That's why he's the best in the world. What he does next is he takes serious rapport capital. He's about to change and challenge Alex directly, but he does it in a way that strengthens the relationship instead of breaking it.
But when I say get off your emotional ass, stop this fuck happiness shit.
Yeah.
Now, this is where Tony really earns his reputation. He looks at Alex and he says, get off your emotional ass, all right? Now, everyone knows that kind of direct challenge can go one of two ways. It can either create connection or it can create conflict. But the difference is whether you've earned the right to say it. Notice the sequence that Tony followed in order to get there. He didn't walk in and just immediately start challenging. He first controlled the frame, then he honored Alex's identity by splitting it, not attacking it, and then he created emotional association and anchored a positive state. Only after all of that did he deliver the sharp challenge. Now, this is something that you will want to internalize if you're in any kind of leadership or sales or coaching role. You earn the right to challenge somebody by first making them feel seen, heard, and respected. And when you do that, when you build that bridge of rapport first, you can say almost anything and it lands as love, not criticism, right? Earn the right to challenge before you challenge. That is ethical influence, all right? So now, Tony has Alex fully engaged, emotionally present, physically shifted, and receptive to direct feedback. And this is the moment that Tony plants the seed that will change everything. Now, remember earlier I told you to watch layers 2, 6, and 9? We're at layer 6 now. So this is the one where it's the engine that drives the entire conversation forward past this point, all right? This is where Tony shifts from breaking down who Alex is to building up who Alex could become. He said, you need a moonshot, which already is a novel idea Alex hasn't heard of before. So he's like, okay, what's that? But Tony then does something pretty extraordinary. He paints a picture, vivid, specific, and emotional. He said 100,000 men, each making $100,000. And the ripple effect on their families, their communities, their legacy, right? But here's what's happening psychologically. Tony is not just giving advice, he is planting a mental movie. And when someone emotionally experiences a future, when they can see it, when they can feel it, when they can hear the crowd, when they can feel the weight of the impact, their unconscious mind begins moving toward it. And it's no longer an idea, it becomes a destination. It's the difference between looking at a map and actually standing at the edge of the cliff, seeing the view for yourself. The map is intellectual, but the view is visceral. And Tony just took Alex to the edge of that cliff. Now, here's what I want you to think about. When was the last time that somebody painted a picture for you that was so vivid that you could actually feel it in your body? Or better yet, when was the last time that you did that for someone else, for a prospect, for a team member, for your audience? Because this is one of the most powerful tools in influence, and most people never use it. They describe outcomes, they list benefits, but they never create the emotional experience of the future. And that's the difference between information and transformation. People oftentimes describe outcomes, but leaders, influencers, create the emotional experience of the future. That's what we call future pacing. Now, Tony has built the vision, but visions need support. They need proof, they need weight. And that's kind of where Tony heads next, right? The way that Tony adds that weight is through something that most people already think of as like just telling stories, but it's not storytelling. It's what's called strategic metaphor deployment, right? And it bypasses resistance completely. So watch how Tony reinforces the vision he just planted, right? He doesn't argue for it. He doesn't present data. He stacks metaphors.
Take the astronauts. I got to interview several of them, right? Think of that. They went out and they competed. They wanted to be an astronaut, right? And you had a version of that. I want to be a business owner, whatever it was you had, right? And they beat everybody, right? Tens of thousands of people. They got down to 100, down to 25, down to 6, down to the guys that go to the moon, right? And they walk on the moon. They look back and see that image. You and I have seen it. They took blue-green of the Earth, but that was them seeing it. And they make it back and survive. They splash down. They have a ticker tape parade. They shake the president's hand. Now, what the do you do after you've walked on the moon for adventure? I guess like you're 35 and you walked on the moon. What do you do?
astronauts going to the moon, climbing a mountain. And the brain reduces, quiets down, and the heart magnifies. Now, here's something that people don't understand about persuasion. The logical mind is a gatekeeper. Every time that you present an argument, the brain evaluates it, questions it, it looks for holes. But a metaphor walks right past the gate. Think of the logical mind like a bouncer at a club, right? The arguments are waiting in line. They get checked. Some get turned away. Metaphor is on the VIP list. So it's a story, and it just walks right in. It sits down in the emotional center of the brain and makes itself at home. And that is exactly what Tony is doing. He's not trying to convince Alex. He's bypassing the need for convincing entirely. And you felt this yourself. Think about the best advice that you've ever received. Was it a logical argument, or was it a story, an image, or a metaphor that just clicked, the light bulb moment, if you will? Arguments wait in line, but metaphors are on the VIP list. And that's why Tony doesn't argue, he tells stories, all right? Now, alongside these metaphors, Tony is also doing something extremely deliberate, how he positions himself. He's building authority, but not in the way that you would think. He never once says overtly, I'm powerful or I'm successful. Instead, he does something far more effective. Tony gives a masterclass in how to build authority without ever sounding arrogant. He casually references feeding billions of people, working with presidents, advising billionaires, coaching championship sports teams. But notice he never says, I'm the greatest. He doesn't even list his credentials. He just demonstrates proximity to power through narrative. And he lets the stories carry the authority. And it goes without saying, right? This is the approach that every high-level communicator actually uses. The person who says, I'm the expert, loses credibility. The person who tells a story with their expertise is obvious, right? That person owns the room. The biggest mistake that I see people making is leading with credentials. Whether they say, I've been doing this for 15 years, or I have 3 certifications. Nobody fucking cares, right? That's all that they care about is evidence. And the best evidence isn't a certificate, it is a story about impact. Now, ask yourself, when you are positioning yourself in a conversation, a pitch, or a piece of content, are you telling people that you're credible, or are you showing them? Don't announce your authority. Demonstrate proximity to that authority or to power through narrative, and let the stories do the heavy lifting. All right. Now we're at the final layer now. This is where Tony takes everything that he's built and he just drives it home with pure emotional force. And remember, I told you layer 9 was one of the 3 that, when combined with 2 and 6, essentially gives you a blueprint for changing how somebody sees themselves. So here it comes. This is the moment the entire conversation shifts one last time, and Tony stops talking about business metrics and moonshots, and he starts talking about starving children, about trafficking, about real, visceral human suffering. And listen to what happens to his voice. It deepens. It slows. The energy drops into his chest. Every word carries weight. Now, this is very deliberate. He is using emotional contrast to pull Alex completely out of abstraction. You cannot stay in your head when someone is talking about a child who has not eaten in 3 days. You are forced to feel that. And this is the engine of all decision making. Logic persuades slowly and induces the security guard at the front of the brain, but emotion persuades instantly. When Tony raises the emotional stakes like this, connecting Alex's work to the deepest human suffering, he is not just motivating Alex, he's making it emotionally impossible for Alex to stay where he is. Think about that in your own world. When you are trying to move somebody into action, a client, a team member, or maybe an audience, are you speaking to their head or are you speaking to their heart? Because the head will deliberate forever, but the heart decides now. Logic persuades slowly and induces the security guard, but emotion persuades instantly. That's not manipulation, it's just how humans are wired, right? But then right at the end, Tony does one final thing, and it might be the most sophisticated move of the entire conversation. I'm gonna give you this as a bonus.
It's time to transcend. Transcend means end the trance.
Okay.
Tony looks at Alex and he says, end the trance. Think about that for a second. By calling Alex's current way of thinking a trance, he's relabeling the old identity as completely unconscious. He's framing the analytical, held-back version of Alex as something that's been happening on autopilot, a pattern that Alex didn't even choose, but one that he's been living in, kind of like the Matrix, kind of like being hypnotized. And the question that creates in Alex's mind is, if I've been in trance this whole time, what does waking up look like? And that question, that's the doorway to the new identity that Tony built across the entire conversation. It's like somebody has been wearing tinted glasses their whole life, and Tony just said, those are glasses, take them off. Once you know the glasses exist, you can't pretend that they don't. So label the old pattern as unconscious, and the new identity becomes the only conscious choice. So in this one conversation, roughly 30 minutes, Tony deployed the 9 layers of invisible influence. That weren't motivation, it wasn't coaching. There's one more thing actually that happened. It was really influence at the highest level, but it wasn't tactics, it wasn't scripts. It's identity, emotion, and frame control, all orchestrated by somebody who has spent over 40 years mastering this game, right? But here's the real question. Now that you can see these patterns, now that you can name them, what are you going to do with them? Because most people will watch this video and think, oh, that was interesting, and then just go right back to what they were doing before. But some of you, the ones who understand that influence is the skill that sits underneath every other skill, you're going to want to go deeper. Now, if you found this helpful, if watching this video made you realize there's an entire layer to this life and communication that you've been missing, then I've built a place for people like you and I. It's a free community called the Game of Influence, and inside, I break down these exact patterns every single week. Not theory, not philosophy, actual tactical and applicable influence principles that you can use in your very next conversation, your next pitch, your next presentation, whatever it may be, right? Because the game is not about sales and marketing. The game is about influence. And once you see the game for what it actually is, you will never play the game the same way again. The link's in the description. I'll see you inside.